what were you thinking when you thought, when I said I wanted somebody from the community so I could do a project, and then you introduced me to that area, knowing that I was this objective, cynical, everything that you thought was ethically and morally wrong in photography. I don't know, that's probably going a bit far, but you certainly had a view of what I was doing, which we can get onto later, but potentially, hopefully, that may have changed.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the change later, but your idea of the sort of work I was producing, especially from Benefit Street, which had a reputation, the TV documentary, which I did stills for, had a terrible reputation for being what we call poverty porn.
Well, it is poverty porn, isn't it? It's,
yeah. And my stills went along with that. My stills were the portraits of the subjects from that series, but had a similar kind of, well, I would call it a brutal truth about it. But I think you had a different view of it at the time, which related to your dissertation that you wrote for your BA, right?
Oh yeah, it's not a brutal truth. It's not a brutal truth at all. It's like even the people on that documentary have said that it's not the truth. They have no access or control over how they're being seen, how they're being represented, and they've basically given all their rights up. I think it was like 900 and something Ofcom complaints about the misrepresentation of Benefit Street, and some of them come from the people who were on the show.
It's very hard to be responsible for a picture once it's out there. I photographed a boy who was about 7 years old, who was a son of a friend of mine, completely naked with a stormtrooper helmet on his head. And it was really interesting because his father was the creative director of a big sort of production company, and he does all those things that he makes all those terrible shows that we talked about, like Benefit Street and stuff like that. And he didn't want his picture of his son shown at that age because of all the reasons you said. And he was the, that's privilege. That's pure privilege.
Exactly what? Oh my God, I can't.
That must make you so crazy, right?
That's, yeah.
Because that's pure privilege, isn't it? He doesn't want it for himself and his son. But his mum was like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. She kind of got it. And then, of course, when the son was older, when the son reached 18, we had another meeting with him in terms of ethics and stuff, because I'm still very good friends with the family. And we got the picture out, and he had a big print, and I've got the documentation of the pictures of me showing him the print and having a discussion with him at an age where he's closer to being able to make a rational decision about whether that picture wants to be seen. And of course, that picture I wanted to enter for Taylor Wessing and a few other things, but the father didn't want it entered. And then I was like, fine, even though you can't identify the child because he's got this helmet on, I chose, my decision was easy, but very, very upsetting to me as the artist, very upsetting. I chose not to show it. Regardless of what the image looks like, what about the idea of the context of what you learned about why I was doing it?
I'm more confused now than I was when we started.
Right.
Because I did think you were coming in as middle class and exploiting my community. I really did, and then that made me feel like
for what purpose?
That's what I mean. I don't know what your purpose is. I don't know what the intent is, and I still don't, to be honest. We've
spoken about it a lot, but
I know. I know.
Yeah,
I think with my work, it's just completely different. It's like I go up, and if I go to Town Hill shooting, it's not just taking photos, it's going there and spending time with them and telling them my story and hoping that just that one person thinks that they can do something with their lives. And then even if it's just one person, that other person will go on to change somebody else's life. It's like a ripple effect. That's my intent.
Or you hope so.
I hope, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that's something that we agree with in how we approached Sierra.
Yeah.
Sierra is probably a better example of us having something in common. We'll get on to Sierra in a minute, but I think that's a very good point, that you don't understand my intent and you're still suspicious of it a year later, because because there's a part of me which I think you know is true, that nothing else matters except the work.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of horrifying, there's something really horrifying about that. That there's something, I'm in no way comparing myself to anybody like Arbus or people like that, but Arbus had that similar kind of completely sort of laser focused interest in capturing images. And I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, between my care of people and my empathy for people and my need and my constant need and drive to create an image of value, whatever that means. So I think from your point of view, potentially what you're observing, which is the more cynical, it could be seen as more cynical, is that need to take a great image. It's so overwhelming.
What is your intent for this work, for Benefit Street, for
Well, it's interesting because no, it's interesting because I wasn't involved in the making of the documentary. I was commissioned to go and photograph the people, but photography is interesting because you're denying even more information with a photograph. You're literally presenting somebody's life in a single moment.
I feel like that about some of the images we've made together.
In what sense?
I feel like the context of some of the images are more important than some of the images. So especially Lawnmower Man. So I remember our conversation, and like for me it was the story behind that image that was most important for me.
What was the story? This is the picture in the gallery of the Lawnmower Man looking up to the sky, waving his arm with this very complex emotional face.
Yeah, there's no context of this. It's in a really deprived area.
Yes.
A really rough area, Swansea, actually, one of the worst.
I loved that spot, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
I was really drawn to that spot. But potentially we can talk about why I'm drawn to places, but but go on. No, what was the context? Tell me.
That he had been doing people's lawns for them. His nan and the nan's next door neighbour. And he had gone up and basically done their lawns because they were
just as a favour.
Yeah, just because.
Yeah,
that's what people do. If that's what I mean by community.
And I have a very strong sense of what community means as well. And my idea of what community means where I live has been informed by the time I spent with you as well, but also with my background. People think potentially I'm just this photographic artist with this colonial gaze going around exploiting people, but I have very strong connections to my community. But what's interesting is that I think you may have learned that my photographs aren't really about a single issue, are they? So the picture of the Lawnmower Man, like with Benefit Street, you're representing him in this moment. I don't think it's an undignified photograph. I think it's a beautiful photograph of him personally. He's not framed in a particularly none of the photographs are titled either, so there's no context given in the gallery to the title. So I guess you could bring and project your own prejudice onto them. I think what I was trying to say about it not being from Swansea, I think what I was trying to say was that I didn't want people to think that the work that was created was about Swansea and to say this is representative, because it's not. It's representative of my own. This is a project about the view of one person.
Yeah.
On and it's almost like a sort of artist using Swansea as just an opportunity for me to explore what the influence, the subconscious influence of one personality can make on representing an area. Yeah. So I think the mistake that people make is that my pictures are about that.
Yeah.
Okay. They're about the fact that you can't go into an area to do truthful documentation because you're present in that landscape as well. And that's what my work is about. So I think that's where there is some confusion, because people don't realize that actually what I'm bringing is my own issues to the work, and I'm creating those images, not cynically constructing them, but you've worked with me, you've seen that it's very in the moment, right? I'm completely consumed, right?
Yeah.
There's no hesitation, is there?
No.
Especially with the lawnmower guy. I mean, I love those pictures for that, because I just became, and that intimacy that I get with somebody with a camera that I don't know was something that he was prepared to participate in, which is extraordinary. But I suppose the part of it which is difficult to comprehend is that it's not fair to say I'm not interested, because I am interested, but I'm not interested in that narrative truth, because you can't represent that narrative truth in one image. But I do think that the complexity of his expression in that picture with the lawnmower, looking up to the sky like that, which is captured completely randomly with the flash and everything, just by working with him and talking to him, just brought us to that moment. It doesn't make any sense. You can't put a judgment on it. You don't know what's going on, because it's just like there's no, the context has been removed. The only context we have is by talking about this now and saying it's Town Hill and it's Swansea. So one of the reasons why I reframed it in this Wizard of Oz frame, was to say, this is not reality.
Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you are really great and powerful, you'll keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures, think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, it's exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
We're going to have to use the E word soon, which is we're going to have to talk about the existential nature of things. Okay. And, the fact that there's a bigger picture, because a lot of people, we're very careful to reframe this project as not about Swansea, right?
Yeah.
And not about Town Hill, because of the very reasons you said.
But for me, it doesn't matter about the existential. The people are still coming from communities like that. It's that they don't see it as being existential. They see themselves there and being represented the way you've chosen to represent them. I don't think they would understand the existential, because I still don't understand it.
Well, it's maybe not the word, but I think that's disingenuous, because I think you do understand things, but you may not necessarily understand. And I don't. Nobody understands existentialism anyway. So, but I think that's disingenuous of you, yourself, and of the community, that people don't understand things. Because I've probably been given wisdom and knowledge from people with no education and an ability to, and who haven't gone to university or haven't done all those things, have taught me so much more than people that have, who come from middle class communities, bourgeois communities. So I think that the knowledge and the life experience and that is there, and I do think people do understand what's going on. And remember, this is portraiture as well, right? These are portraits, so it's not. There is a contract between me and that person. I kind of feel like if there's an element of lack of understanding, then that leads to more empathy. If you don't, I usually come from the point that I don't understand somebody, so therefore, and I don't think they're like me. I don't assume everybody's like me, and that helps.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But with Sierra, Sierra, I suppose, is another level of those images of Sierra. Sierra is the pictures of the naked body with the self-harming scars on the sofa, and her kind of like dancing next to some cat litter.
Yeah.
With her self-harming scars, right?
Yeah.
So where are we in the argument about how none of my subjects have any control over themselves and don't know what's going on, and I'm just taking advantage of them? That doesn't quite apply to Sierra, does it?
No. I think that's why I was really interested in Sierra, because we were on the course together, and she's really intelligent. Like, I don't think she's not aware of what she's doing. She's very aware of what she's doing.
Right. So that's my point. So, what do you think's going on there then, in terms of my practice and her? Are you?
But I'm confused about, because like it was like a different relationship with Denise and Sierra than it was with all the others. I think you have a personal relationship now with Sierra and Denise.
Denise, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were more portrait in the traditional sense of, we were invited into their homes and it was organized, whereas the lawnmower guy was more like street photography, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like,
and that was a good day, that street photography day. It was very exciting. But you're right, I kind of concede that you're right there. The relationship with those people was not built up. So, but in terms of photographic theory, the idea of giving somebody, I think probably more so with Sierra than Denise, but certainly with Sierra, there was this idea that being seen and being heard and understood and empathized with was important to her, right? And the camera had value there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think she feels that. And with Sierra, she's on the course. That's what her work really would be about. Like, her poetry is about her mental health and everything really that she does. She's an advocate for that.
Yes. Well, how does that fit in with the ethics of, because the images are the same. The images are if you saw them without context, because those pictures are presented without context as well. There's no context in the exhibition apart from that one statement.
But Sierra will be coming in to speak about that. So
yeah, but not everyone will read them and see that.
But she gets her own voice, whereas all them other people don't.
Right.
I don't
think. Well, they could do, but yes.
Yeah,
we can make room for them. Do I feel responsible for my subjects? That is an existential issue. You're right. I have a responsibility towards them. I don't feel responsible for them. That's different.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I get that.
I think you have to have boundaries. I can't save Sierra, but that's why me and Sierra get on.
Yeah.
But Sierra knows that. I think my Samaritan experience is really vital. You're right.
Yeah.
In this instance with Sierra, with something as extreme as suicidal ideation and self-harm, you can't just walk in there without knowing what you're getting involved with and knowing.
Sorry, Bob.
No, but I do think that's really important to say that. And I think in terms of saying that sounds really brutal, that I'm not responsible for them. I have a huge responsibility in that representation of her. And I would be devastated as an artist if she turned around and said that she didn't want those pictures shown. That would be heartbreaking for me, but I'd have to do it. But because I think that's where you get confused with me, because there's a part of me which puts the creation of work often very, very close.
Yeah.
Very, very close, uncomfortably close to the responsibility of subject. But I'm not as cynical as, say, someone like Philippe Lorca de Corsia or someone like that, who sued one of his subjects for not agreeing for his image to be allowed to be used. I certainly wouldn't do that. I do have a moral responsibility and a social responsibility to my subjects. I think with Sierra specifically, you have to know what to say and what not to say when you're speaking to somebody with and accepting of somebody non-judgmentally in that situation. And you can't save somebody, and the instinct is to save somebody when they're like that. But it's not like there's a huge arrogance in thinking that I can just step into someone's life who's going through that kind of level of turmoil, and somehow feel like I can make a difference. But I do feel like I can make a difference as an artist. But I also think that's incredibly arrogant of us to think that we're able to make that much of a difference in people's lives with our little cameras. I think there's an awful lot of people out there doing really, proper, decent work in the community as nurses and, doctors and psychotherapists and people like that. And I do think there's an arrogance in the art world of us wandering into these people's lives thinking, oh, I've made Sierra feel better by pointing my camera at her. And I think it would be disingenuous to say that as an artist, we don't have pride in our own work that we create through the process of it. And I'm not saying that you're like that, but I do think you have to acknowledge or ask yourself the question about whether or not you're creating images that are of any value to you personally. Mm. Clearly, I'm an extreme version of that, because I tend to sort of wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm like the sort of bad poster boy for all the reasons why people become artists. But in terms of, I am creating something of beauty in something terrible with Sierra.
Yeah,
that was what we're trying to do, and Sierra understood that. Was that you can create something of the terrible drama of human existence by using Sierra and her life and her body to represent something much bigger. And I think that's what I mean by, and I think that's where I start to become difficult to read. If your interest is purely in the photography as an art form, not in its product, but in its use to the community. But I feel like a photograph can be something that is representative of a much, much bigger story about, for instance, if you let me just finish the point about it, is that scarring and damage in Sierra's actual life is a metaphor for all of our lives, in the sense of we get scarred and then we heal. And that image is not about hurting herself. Those images are about her healing, because it's a scar is an indication of the last time you hurt yourself. It's a memory of the last time you were in that terrible state that you were brought to, where you had to do that. And that becomes a metaphor, you see. So then the image, I'm trying to defend myself from your label you gave me before, and I think Sierra allows me to defend myself by saying my objective is to create an image that allows for that bigger discussion, which ultimately could bring a change in empathy towards each other. So that's a better defense of what I'm trying to do.
Okay, but then I worry about that image, the impact that image is going to have after it's been shown. So
right,
the viewers prejudiced, and I think we've already had some comments about Sierra's images about it.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, very interesting ones actually, but based, yeah.
How will that affect her? How do we know that? I know it's not our responsibility and about her mental health or anything, but what if that affects her negatively? And then how much responsibility is on us for that in the future? That's my worry about things like that. But I think this is why I'm
there's a danger. I totally hear what you're saying, but I think there's a danger of potentially patronizing somebody who is, it's possible to have, and we'll talk to Sierra later, but about it, because clearly we're talking about her and not asking her what she thinks, right?
If we're talking about everybody, then I would say that, like, I've spoken to, my friends, the self-harmer, and they have their own prejudice against the same image, and they have the same disabilities. So it's like, and that's what they think. It's like, if my mental health got worse and I didn't want them images to be seen anymore, and I think that's why I'm so thinking about GDPR and my model release forms.
Yes, yeah, that's true, and I do agree with that. So, and that clause is morally in what I do, whereas, as you say, there are a lot of photographers that don't have that in there, and will say, well, no, the drive, the importance is the image itself. I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because I have been approached by adults who I've photographed as troubled young people in the past, in previous work that I've done, and one of my pictures popped up of this boy with some ADHD and borderline personality disorder issues when he was about, I don't know, 12. And there's a picture of him standing at the front of his house, and a lot of mental health issues visually you can't see particularly. With Sierra, the results of some of her ways of managing her mental health are on display. But I did want to quickly say, before I tell that story, is that having a mental health issue does not make you unintelligent.
No, I don't think that.
And I know you don't think that. I just think it's important to say that for people watching this, that if there is prejudice towards Sierra's ability to rationalize is not in question here. It looks like it is, because she's hurting herself, but she has a complex mental health issues that sometimes have led to her hurting herself in that way. This boy with the ADHD and the borderline personality issues, I was doing a thing on teens with suicidal ideation. It was a long time ago, and it was just this picture of this boy standing in front of the house, with his hood up and stuff. He looks troubled, but there's clearly a complex thing going on there. Anyway, the picture popped up out of nowhere without my permission on the internet, and I think it was shot in the late 80s or something. So it was pre-internet. It was shot on film and everything, but it had been used for this for a documentary that had been made about that area, and somebody had found this picture and used it. And I was contacted by the boy as an adult in his 20s, and he was furious, absolutely furious, and he wanted to tell me about what had happened to his life since that time, because he was having a really difficult time then. But he was underage. He was about 12 and not capable of making decisions or understanding where that picture could be used in a very clear way that's defined by age. And I understand that none of us are capable of that, of never not really understanding how an image is going to be read by somebody else.
Yeah.
But anyway, he came forward and said, I don't want that image used. And I'm like, that's totally fine. I didn't use it, but I'll call them and get in contact with you. And I've been in contact with him ever since, because I think it'll be really interesting to have a conversation with him like we're having, and talking about what it's like to have this picture that defines you. There's another picture of a woman in Grimsby, and she had meth mouth, or she'd lost all her teeth from using drugs and just not looking after herself. And now she's turned her life around. She's not on the game anymore. She's in a great relationship. She's had her teeth fixed. She's absolutely completely turned herself around. But there is this image of her taken 10 years ago on this street as a working prostitute, as a drug addict. She doesn't mind that, but that's because that's her decision, that's her interest. So I think my point is that, I mean, there has to be a line at which you make the decisions about what's used and what's not used. And if you're going to work in these difficult areas and these difficult subjects, there needs to be an open relationship with that person, continuing open relationship with that person.
Yeah.
And I do have that. So I think, again, it's very useful for you to challenge me, because I do have evidence for some sense of a moral practice in what I'm doing. So what's interesting about that sort of difference, but the same thing, about what the use of the gallery space is and whether showing art in the community is valuable. So I think part of my empathy with you was that when I was looking into doing some hunting, because I was really interested in connecting to the young men of the community. And I feel like men particularly, but young men especially, are very difficult to connect to. And I was thinking, how do we do that? How can I make a connection to young men's lives in the community? And boys, we're so difficult. And then this idea of the lamping came up. So you did some research for me and brought some photos of the lamping to show me some of the dogs and stuff like that. And I just got really excited, didn't I? Just in terms of talking about whether or not people feel like they're connected to art, you know, and whether it's for them or not. And then suddenly to come across these pictures where they're not putting these pictures in again, they haven't put these pictures in a gallery or anything, but they've clearly taken a huge amount of effort and time to compose their animals and to create these pictures, which I immediately related to centuries of art history of representation of hunting. As I say that, I can hear people just go, oh, but it is, and it says that, you know, these compositions and the way that we represent life are still hugely valid, and they've been passed on to this generation. And I just thought these pictures, in terms of our conversation about whether we have work from the community or whether we bring work to the community, and certainly in the way you were working, about how you were working up towards your BA and what the hell you were going to do, especially during lockdown. Suddenly we had these photographs of these boys with these the beautiful dogs and the hunt and the kill from the hunt, and I just saw them as utterly, beautiful, and representations of equal to the greatest representations of hunting in art history. I just thought they're extraordinary pictures, totally genuinely. But also, I just thought, well, there we are. We can bring them in. And found photography is a thing. I've never included found photography in my practice, but I just thought this was an amazing opportunity to bring these pictures into the gallery, and we've given them a completely unique space, haven't we, in the gallery, just to show them off. Even though I still think they fit really well within the exhibition, that process of the whole of existence, the whole of life, through to and how we survive and how we exist. That's the whole idea of this project.